when it comes down to entrepreneurship, why do you find it more challenging for you at the beginning of your career as entrepreneur when you were running as a from full time trying to go into your own path? What was the most challenging thing for you that you encounter as you immerse fully as entrepreneur?
Yeah, great question. And I love this question because it's not just one thing that I found challenging. When I first made the transition, I actually took time before I made the transition. So, and I think
Mm,
a lot of times, people kind of go right into it, which there's no wrong way to go about entrepreneurship. You know this, you're an entrepreneur yourself. But I actually took time before I went into it because I really wanted to approach it from a completely different place than I've approached
mm,
looking at jobs, and I wanted to really approach it from a place of purpose. And I had to really like focus on my mindset. I think like when you're in a job, it's so easy to, you know, get into the job, especially if you've done it before. You just, kind of operate in on all cylinders. And sometimes you're running really fast if you're working in a startup. Sometimes it's a little bit of a marathon, but entrepreneurship is very much like a marathon. And so
mhm,
I would say like my biggest challenge was just adjusting my mindset, to understand that this was not a short term thing. This was going to be a long, process. And more importantly, I was going to have to learn a lot, because I'd never been, I've never like built my own business. So I knew there was
yeah.
going to be a huge learning curve. So I think
Mhm,
even just that was a challenge, is just embracing, failure, for
yeah.
me. It was a huge shift.
Yeah. It's really interesting to me to the way you approach it because like you mentioned many people just go dive into it myself.
Yeah.
I include myself because when I decided to go fully into my own, I kind of had a set, not a setback, but I prepared myself mentally. It's
Mhm.
the same thing you did, but the thing that I really love about the way you approach it is you wanted to do it purposely.
Yes.
And I think based on my own personal experience, that's some of the that's one of the major things that people kind of know they had to create purpose, but they kind of like, I'll find it on my way.
Yes.
You took the time to try to connect your mindset with your soul in a
Yes.
way, and you're trying to align it. What was yeah, how you were able to achieve that though?
Yeah, it was so interesting because I've always been very self-reflectant. Like I'm a former
Mm,
athlete, so I've always taken time to reflect, to audit, but I'd never done it in a way where I spent time alone. Minus the
mm,
time, of course, I'm with my children. I'm a single mom, but I really spent time alone, meaning I shut out the world. I shut out any outside calls. Like I took very limited calls. I didn't want anything to confuse, what I was hearing from my higher power, who I call God. And so
yeah.
I wanted to take time for myself, which I'd never done. And, I'm over 40 and 40 years of living. I'd never done this. And it was so important for me because I knew that if I was going to be able to do this long term, it needed to be a lot more purposeful. And so I spent time alone journaling. I spent time
Mm,
alone just praying and meditating and practicing mindfulness and just really spending time really with myself. But more importantly, cleaning out my inner mirror, and going on a
mm,
really deep healing journey that
yeah.
allowed me to allow more light to get in, so
Yeah.
then I could hear, so then I could see, so then I could understand. And I started seeing that the way that God wanted me to show up was actually how I've already been showing up, you know, but on a larger scale. And so
Mhm.
it was really wonderful, like the answers that I got when I went on this path, but I spent a lot of time. So what I did is actually documented what I
Mm,
did because I thought, oh, maybe someone might ask how I kind of went about doing this. And it was 10 steps to practice self-reflection. And I think before you really do anything, it is so important to spend time with yourself.
yeah.
So you can understand that you're in and put yourself in the right heart space. We talk about mindset so much, but I think it's so important to also be in the right heart space. And that's where I
Mhm.
wanted to be because I think like,
Yeah.
like any of us, I've taken jobs off of like pure needs. And sometimes it was a lot more
Yeah.
fear based
Yeah.
because I was like, I didn't want to be broke or I need to pay my bills. And it was just
Hmm.
always like, those reasons. And not to
Yeah.
say I didn't love the companies, I loved every company I worked for. And I needed to have some type of emotional connection in order to do a
Hmm.
great job. But
Yeah.
it was so different. I wanted to be in a very much a heart space, and I think like we operate in
Hmm.
such a fear based
Yeah.
space, so I really wanted to be in more of a love space. So that's really how I did it. And one of my favorite quotes, if I can just take the time to share this, one of my favorite quotes is like the mantra for my life. I really
Hmm.
have three, but this is probably the ultimate, and it's by Irma Bombeck. And she says, "When I stand before God at the end of my life, I would hope that I wouldn't have a single bit of talent left, and I could say I used everything He gave me."
Yeah. That's so beautiful, though. Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate the fact that you took the time to share that. And it is clear to me the self awareness and the fact that it's kind of similar for what I did. I was forced to do it because of the pandemic.
Yeah,
Like I was forced to go within myself, um, in order for me to find, just like you, purpose, to find the higher purpose. What was that about? So when I started immersing fully into this entrepreneurship, I had to start working on myself, connecting my heart with my mind. I worked for so long in personal growth. That what I find is about personal growth is that we get to read books and do X, Y, and Z. For me,
hmm,
when I achieve certain things based on the books, I start asking myself, why am I not happy? What is missing? So I've been working so hard in my mind that I wasn't able to connect my mind with my heart. So when
yes,
I find because they both intertwine, right? They both enhance each other. It's not like one is bigger than the other one. Both, we need both. You still
absolutely,
need the mindset, but you still need the purpose behind it. You were able to go all in, to take the time and isolate in a way yourself. Even
yes,
as a mom, you taking care of your kids, but you were able to understand the purpose you had behind, and it wasn't just for you. I'm pretty sure you thought about your kids. And this
absolutely,
is what I want to take it, because you, even though you want to do something great for your kids, you were able to say, I got to take care of myself so I can take care of my kids.
absolutely,
I
absolutely.
really had to follow what God is asking me to do.
Yeah, and it wasn't easy, like, I mean, what he was asking me to do was to be on the forefront, and to lead in
Mhm.
front. For so long I've led in the back as a,
Yeah.
people leader working in a lot of early and growth stage startups. A
Hmm.
lot of the things I did, I was the face of a particular function of the organization, right? But
Yeah.
still operated very under the radar, and I think a
Hmm.
lot of HR leaders do, because we're so people focused, and building
Hmm.
others up. And so it was really time for me to turn all of that energy back
Yeah.
onto myself, which I had not done, and I went on a healing journey, probably starting when I was like
Hmm.
32 years old. And and it has been quite a process to get to this
Yeah.
point. But what is so wonderful that came out of it, and I really encourage a lot of my clients, is to spend time with yourself and to understand that you cannot continue to serve from a fractional version of yourself, but we do it so often. We're pouring and pouring and pouring, and
Yeah.
eventually our glass gets so empty
Hmm.
that we're on reserve, and I had been on reserve for years. And it was just
Yeah.
really time for me to pause what I was doing externally for everyone
Hmm.
else,
Yeah.
and really pour it back into myself so then I could show up fully. And that's the
Hmm.
gift, right? Because when you can show up fully for not only yourself, but for your kids, for your, spouse, your partner, whatever it is, your family, your friends, your community, that's
Yeah.
when you're in the right space, And for me, I
Hmm.
really wanted to focus on aligning mind, body, soul, and heart.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in order for me to do that, I had to take care of myself. I had to pour back into myself, but then
Yeah.
also ask myself the hard questions, like, why
Hmm.
am I here? What is my purpose? What does God want from me? Like, how can I empty myself?
Yeah.
Going back to Irma Bombeck's point, how can I empty myself and leave it all here?
Hmm.
Share all the gifts.
Yeah.
because we all have gifts inside of us. Every last one of us. We have so many gifts inside of us that are meant to be shared. They're not even ours. God placed
Hmm.
them there for us to share. And so it's
Yeah.
selfish for people not to discover their purpose.
Yeah. This is so beautiful, though, and
Thank you.
it is really admirable to see how connected you are with your purpose. It is really fascinating for me to watch, not just from this conversation. The last conversation we had, we were able to connect, and now that I'm able to pick up your brain the way you were pretty much your process. You mentioned
Yeah.
one thing that for me, I call it blocking the noise. You
Yes.
were able to isolate yourself, and you say like I was taking minimum calls because I didn't want any voices from the outside.
Mhm.
You started practicing that. So there are several things that we as entrepreneurs, that for me, if somebody go to tell me like what are the three steps that you can take as entrepreneur, for me is the first one is block the noise. And
Yes.
people's like, what do you mean by that? I'm like, make sure the people that is surrounding you is the people that it's gonna support you, whether you up here or whether you're down here. If not,
Facts.
it's okay. It doesn't mean you don't love them. Doesn't mean they don't care for you. It just means that you're on a different path, and it's okay. I'm heading that way, and I was very clear with myself. I'm heading that way. You don't want to go that way. That's okay, but I'm heading that way. And I was able to block the noise. The way I block the noise, sometimes I put myself into situations that I'm able to block the noise. What I mean by that, I can go and sit down in a restaurant, bring my laptop, put my headphones. It doesn't matter what's happening around me. For me, it's able to block the noise. One of the quotes that I heard from Jay Shetty, from one of his teachers, he says, detachment, the greatest attachment is you being closer to anything and everything and not letting it control you or own you. When I heard
Facts.
that, for me, I was like, how can I put myself into those things and not let it control me or own me? So I started
Yes.
practicing that particular type of detachment. And for me, it's been one of my powerful tools that I have that I still practicing until this day, just because of the so much noise, especially now that we're creating so much content. You were able to execute that very well. In that particular topic, what other tools or tips do you have for people to start going into they want to go as entrepreneurs, they want to create their business, but they hear so much noise. They're just not able to, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's social media, TV, it doesn't matter. What other tools do you have or tips can you share with the audience?
I would say first and foremost is to spend time with yourself and understand like what do you even want to be known for? Like what do
Yeah.
you even how do you even want to show up? Maybe it's a problem you want to solve that you're passionate about. But first
Yeah.
you have to start with you.
Hmm.
Like nothing moves forward in the right way if you don't start with yourself first. So I would say first spending
Yeah.
time with yourself, whatever that looks like for you, because everyone's so different. For me, I love to journal. Some people hate journaling,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. That's true.
yeah, and some people love meditation, some hate it, but like whether it's like mindful walks, like I get a lot of inspiration just from walking
Hmm.
and really spending time with myself. So I would say start there. And then from there I would want to know like, what problem do I want to solve? Like before you can go forth as an entrepreneur, you need to understand like what are going to be the pain points of, whoever you're
Yeah.
going to serve,
Hmm.
and so I think that's really key. And then the next is really from there it's showing up authentically, and it
Yeah.
sounds very cliche, but
Yeah.
you mentioned it, you said it, it's like people are always looking at outside individuals, they're looking
Yeah.
at their family or their friends or what this person's doing, what that person's doing.
Hmm.
It's like, no, what do you want to do? Like I'll tell you a quick story. It's
Yeah.
like, I come across so many people all the time, I talk to so many people in a day, and I learn from so many people. But what's so interesting is I take bits and pieces, but then I I figure out like what works for me. Just
Yeah.
because it worked for Omar, just because it worked for Jay Shetty, just because it worked for Mel Robbins, doesn't mean it's going to work for Damesha. And so
Yeah.
I think like by you spending that time with yourself and understanding yourself, that is the key because I
Yeah.
understand myself very deeply. There's
Yeah.
no one on this green earth that can tell me things about myself that I don't already know. Like, I'm the expert of me,
Yeah.
and it's because I learned myself so deeply,
Hmm.
and really got to a place of radical acceptance of myself. The
Yeah.
beauty and the flaws,
Yeah.
both are equally beautiful to me.
Yeah. This is very powerful though. Thank you so much. For me, that's what I call getting to know your process. You mentioned what brings you inspiration, what brings your creativity out of it. You what inspires you, what moves you. You obviously have your higher power, but you at the same time it's like, what's gonna motivate me? What's my inspiration behind? I love the fact that you mentioned that find the problem you're trying to solve.
Yes.
Because we as coaches, we going into this journeys and trying to create entrepreneurship and trying to go in the journey, and we trying to, yeah, I can coach anybody. True.
Yes.
However, at the same time, what is the specific problem that you're trying to solve
Yes.
for that particular person? And for me, it's crucial that question, because I find people, when I start working with people, or when I start working with companies, there's companies that I have worked with. When I ask them, what are your values? What are the strengths of these companies? What are we standing? What are we fighting for? And they have like, well, I don't know. I just created. I solved the problem. I know how to solve the problem, but I'm like, okay, but what is the purpose of solving the problem
Mhm.
besides just solving the problem? And they couldn't figure it out. And I'm like, how do you survive? It's like, it's just, I don't know. I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
well, this is crazy. In that particular topic, you're able to work with companies too. What are the,
Yes.
the main things that you find they struggle with in order for them to scale? Because there's a
Yeah.
certain point when they tap, right? As entrepreneurs, we get to the point where we tap off and it's like, what is next? Well,
Hmm.
you look back and you're like, well, it's a little further down. However, look how far you came. But if you want to regress, it's going to take you too long. But what about if you continue just to try to pivot? In this case, with this podcast, right? I told you, I'm like, it's time for me to pivot. And I appreciate you being open to that idea.
Of course.
What would be for you the main things that you see people in the company level
Mhm.
they struggle with the most?
Yeah, it's such a loaded question because it's not necessarily one thing.
Yeah.
But if I did have to narrow it down to one thing, or maybe two things, I would say, like, first is I find that people don't know themselves,
Mm,
leaders in
yeah.
organizations. So, you know, like you mentioned, they might have the problem they're trying to solve. They go forth. They might even get funding for the problem they're trying to solve,
Yeah.
right? But they have not spent enough time with themselves to even understand how they want to show up as leaders. And
Yeah.
we all know great leaders create other leaders, but they
Hmm.
first need to lead themselves. In order to
Yeah.
do that, they need to know themselves. And so I find that that is probably the biggest problem that I've seen across so many organizations. I have worked for incredible leaders and I have worked for people that need a lot of support and a lot of coaching, but just
Yeah.
didn't know that they did,
Yeah.
because no one had ever coached them, no one had ever helped them kind of show up in that way. And more importantly, they weren't ready, so I think in order, like, to scale any organization, it's so important for the leaders to understand themselves, know what they stand for, and know, like, beyond the problem you're solving, like, what are the core values of
Yeah.
not just the organization, but of you? Like, what
Yeah.
is your core value, And so
Yeah.
I've asked, that's a question I ask a lot of people. Like, when I enter an organization, I'm giving
Mhm.
away some secrets, but I
Yeah. Yeah.
spend time and I talk to every single person in the organization, every single person as a people leader, because I need to, I need to
Yeah.
understand. And so and that's one of the questions I asked them, like, what are your core values? And the
Hmm.
amount of times, if I had a dollar for the amount of times that people could not answer that question, I'd be, super rich. but
Yeah.
but they because I think a large part of it is they don't know themselves. They haven't spent time
Hmm.
with themselves because, again, they're on these, like, hamster wheels just operating, right?
Yeah.
And their operating systems, we all have them. And a lot of their operating systems is just like, oh, I can do the job. Let me go do the job. But they're not thinking about themselves the impact, like where they want to go, what are their core values, does the shop even align with me? You
Yeah.
see why so many people are miserable in organizations and in jobs. It's because there's a misalignment.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, that's the biggest thing, is like knowing, a leader's not knowing themselves, and knowing what they stand for, and also like being aligned with their core values of the organization, because
Yeah.
everything should point to the core values and the North Star of the organization. Everything.
Yeah.
And when
Yeah.
you have that, it allows you to scale. It
Yeah.
allows you to be rooted in something. But a large part of
Hmm.
organizations that are not rooted, and don't get me wrong, I've seen organizations that have really well written values, but then they're misaligned. They're not aligned to those
Yeah.
values that they've written. so,
It's true.
so I would. There's so many. I mean, there's so many things. And then, if I could add one more, it's understanding that they are there to create more leaders,
Mm.
and so pouring into their people. Like,
Yeah.
I see a lot of organizations focus so heavily on customers, and don't get me wrong, you absolutely should, but
Yeah.
you do not have a company without the people in it. Your customers
Yeah.
don't have a product to use without the people that are actually helping you build that. So it's
Yeah.
so important, if you start there, your people will be the mouthpiece for your organization, and your
True.
customers will follow.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. No, that is very. I'm glad that you mentioned it. The reason why is because, just like you, when I get to work with companies or organizations, I was like, well, I work so much with the customers. We really customer focused. I'm like,
yeah,
I love that. I'm glad you
yeah,
do it. I'm
awesome.
glad you do it. That's great.
Yeah,
Who's taking care of your employees? Well, they're there to take care of the customers. I do understand that. But who's
yeah,
taking care of your employees? You're the leader.
yes.
You as a leader, it's not a rank. It's not a position. It's a gift.
It's a
And it's
privilege.
yes, it's a privilege for you to be a leader. And a great leader is that person sacrifice himself for the well-being of others. But you had to take care of yourself so you can take care of others. We taking care of yourself, we need to take care of the people that's going to take care of the people, and then we will create a ripple effect. And
Yes.
they get sometimes mind blowing. It's like, I never thought about that way. That was never introduced to me. This is new to me. And it's mind blowing because so many corporations are just running that way
Mhm.
unconsciously. And that's the type of leaders we get nowadays. And they
Yeah.
think it's okay. And everything gets so confused. Since we're
Yes.
talking about leadership,
Mhm.
you work with so many leaders.
Mhm.
You self, you have your own company. You were able to scale. We're talking about scaling a company. You were able to scale. At what point of your entrepreneurial journey you decided to go, I need to scale? What was the time that for
Well,
you?
it's
Yeah, yeah, go
interesting.
for it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's interesting. I never think like that, actually. It's interesting you ask that question, because it's like, I actually don't think like that. Like, what I think about is long term, short term. And so, like, it's not, because I figure, like, if you are laying the foundation properly, you will, and then, operating in a way of excellence, in everything that you do, then, the scale will happen. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
actually focus on the scale. For me, I focus on the long term, short term, but I want to
Yeah.
make sure that I have a foundation. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say, like, that's what I really started with, was making sure that foundationally, and I just finally feel like I got my foundation where it needs to be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was through trial and error and learning, and doing. But when I've worked for organizations, I would say I took a similar approach, because although a lot of them were focused on scale because maybe they got VC funding, right? And then they had to worry about the numbers and scaling and hitting certain targets.
Yeah.
I would say, like, I always focus on the foundation. So in everything that I do, when you set a great foundation, it allows you to build. It's like building a house, or a
Yeah.
garden. I use the garden analogy a lot, but really, I think foundationally first. And what systems do I need to put in place? Like, what people do I need to hire? Like, where are the holes? Like,
Yeah.
even within myself, like, where, like, how can I hire people that can be, an extension of where I leave off, because
Yeah.
you can't do everything.
Hmm.
And so I think I don't necessarily think of scale. I think of like things in a, foundational way. And then I also think about like short term and long term.
Yeah.
And is my short term, uh, you know, allowing me to get to the long term goals? And if it's not, then I need to adjust.
Yeah. Yeah. This is beautiful though. Thank you for mentioning about the short term and long term, and being so open about your own journey. You obviously has been entrepreneur for quite some time, and you just said, "I just got my foundation now,"
Yes.
and to me that's crucial because a lot of entrepreneurs, we everybody thinks as entrepreneur we got everything right away, we got everything served, and to me it's like no, it's been like until this day I continue to just like you. I'm like I had to everything has to be aligning with this. Like when it comes down to this podcast, I decided to come back to content creation. I'm like, can can I purposely do this? Am I really gonna be able to get the hang of it without sacrificing other things? Everything has to be aligned. Everything has to be running smoothly without me having so much pressure. Because I want to talk about pressure. I don't function with pressure. I can handle the stress, but the minute I have so much pressure, my creativity shuts down. Everything starts
Interesting.
shutting down, and for me it's like wow, this is what I call my three E's. Is my element, my energy, or my environment. Which one with those three E's not aligned? For me it's like which one is not aligned? Something is it's out of it. It's just like you, I know my process. I'm like why this is stressful, like where is this stress is coming from? Start asking myself where is this coming from? It's coming from somewhere. Why? And being honest once again with myself. For you, what would you say that when it comes down to your own process, what is key for you to understand in this case, like this is the short term, this is what we're trying to achieve for the short term, for the long term, but everything is aligned though. What would be key element for you that this is the path that we're going and we're going to immerse fully?
Yeah, I love this question. I want to talk about the pressure component, and then I'll answer that question
Yeah.
directly. But I would say like pressure for me is a privilege. And so I've always understood that, in order to make diamonds, like you need pressure,
Yeah.
anything that kind of gets goes needs pressure. Right. And so, I've always operated under like actually, learning how to apply more pressure when I'm in
Mm,
a pressure situation. And so I actually have this term, I call it PUP, where it's like it's really important to practice under pressure. So for years, I would put myself in pressure situations, like starting back when I was an athlete, like, there's so many things that you can do that, where it's like resistance training, right?
yeah.
That's pressure in
Hmm.
order to run faster.
Yeah.
Right. And so like I applied those same kind of like guiding principles that I took from my track and field days
Hmm.
into my entrepreneur. And so like I actually like to put myself under pressure in pressure situations because it builds
Nice.
up my resilience. And so
Yeah.
so that's one thing I wanted to touch on. But to answer your question directly, like, um, I would say like foundationally, like I rely very heavily on my intuition, because I trust it. And because I know myself and I've done a lot of the deep work and really worked on my inner mirror and cleaning that inner mirror off, like I trust my intuition,
Yeah.
and I always start with God, so I take everything to God before I take
Yeah.
it to any outside person, and I think, it's so easy to do that. Like a lot of us have gotten in the habits of asking this opinion or that opinion. I think it clouds your judgment. And so I actually start with myself first. And then I
Yeah.
want to understand like how does it feel to me? Like energetically, how does it
Yeah.
feel? Does it feel like the right, move? Then I'm gonna go forth, If it doesn't, I trust it. I don't
Yeah.
even question it. And so I
Hmm.
would say I start that with my intuition first. And then, obviously I want to make sure everything is aligned to my core values and, making
Yeah.
sure that everything points to my North Star. But I would say like those are my two things I start with, it's like prayer, my intuition, and then my core values.
Yeah. This is powerful though. And the fact that it's true when you start getting to know yourself, you start
Yeah.
trusting yourself, and you lean into your intuition, which
Yes.
it's clear to me that you are very faith guided, right? This is really powerful, and I feel that as entrepreneurs, it's crucial to understand yourself, but at the same time, start trusting your intuition. You mentioned the fact that,
You
yeah,
have to practice it, right? It's not
yeah,
something that you just gain overnight. It's like, because this I work with clients like you do, and it's like one of the things I tell them, I'm like, it's okay if you get it wrong. It's
yeah,
okay. Like, but
yeah,
the more you practice it, it's like a muscle. It's like working out. Like the more you
yeah,
get your reps in, the easier it becomes, to
hmm,
trust yourself,
yeah,
and then you'll start understanding like, okay, energetically, that felt really good, like, and for me, it's I say energetically, I feel things all five senses. And so that's
hmm,
when I know I'm in the right space, like
yeah,
it's like I'll start getting signs, like, so visually, like I'll feel it energetically, like God, like, when I feel like I'm in the presence of God, it's like my temperature rises, like
hmm,
I can feel it, and so then I'm
yeah,
like, okay, I know I'm in a good space. When I get a gut feeling that like this is probably not the right thing, even though maybe it sounds good, I trust that, and
yeah,
it has not steered me wrong yet, so
yeah,
and this goes for, when I used to go out and look for jobs. So even if, we have people on the call who aren't entrepreneurs, but like, want to apply this to searching for a job, it's like I used to use it in that, like if something doesn't feel right to you, trust that instinct, that first initial, like
yeah,
that's the whisper.
hmm, yeah. This is really interesting. It's interesting and fascinating the fact that you are able to just practice it. You empower your clients. You got to practice it. You're
Have
not
to.
gonna get it right, and that's the entire thing about entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Seriously.
It's pure, like, you just try it, error and trial, right? You just try it. Okay, what worked, what didn't work. Pay
Yeah.
attention to the feedback. Listen to the feedback, and then take the good, whatever work, not the good, but
Mhm.
whatever work, continue to apply it. Oftentimes, what people happens, they try something new, and they start something new again, but without taking any of the feedback, and they start all over again and just continue that feedback loop. And then to me, when I discovered that, I was like, hold on one second, I just tried something new, but something worked over here. How about if I whatever work that it didn't work, but whatever it was working, I take it with me, and then I just continue to fully like take it in a second term. And when I
Yeah.
start applying, I'm like, this is very interesting. And that's what I
Mhm.
call the feedback loop. I just continue to the feedback loop. So I put a project, I put it to three phases. Then I'm like, this is the first one. Listen to the feedback. Okay, it's time to pivot. Let's go. Okay, I put it to the next one. Then I take the feedback. Okay, it's time to pivot. For you, what would be in this case, for the analogy that I use, the feedback loop? What would be that feedback loop? Obviously, you listen to yourself, but what would be tools that you use on your own, or even with your clients or organizations you're working with?
Yeah, it's interesting. You use the term feedback loop. I use the term audit. Like, and
Mm,
I just actually wrote about this in my newsletter. If anyone loves the newsletters, please subscribe to the Soul Fueler Journal on Substack. You can just search my name if you can't remember that, and then it'll come up. But I actually use the auditing as a tool with my clients and also myself. Like I am a firm believer in getting in an auditing process that happens multiple times throughout the year, and use it for everything, not just work, not just your business, but every aspect of your life you should be auditing. If you're using like, the wheel of life, or, some people call it the circle of life analogy, right? There's like 8 different components to that, whether it's your relationships, your finances, your joy, like all of these things,
yeah,
like people should be auditing, or like to your case, the feedback loop,
yeah,
so then that way you can take in the information. First, start with yourself, audit it yourself, but then also like, build in trusted, your board of directors, which I have a handful of board of directors who I trust to get the truth from. And so
Yeah.
these are people who are not afraid to tell me the truth.
Yeah.
They're not afraid to, um, in some cases, like tell me something sucks, and like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm okay with that, but I think it's so important to have, not just yourself, but also like, people that you trust that can give you the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, this is it's really amazing the fact that you say the audit and you mentioned a couple tools, and I'm glad you mentioned your newsletter. Everything will be in the notes, so we'll be put all those. Now, talking about your newsletter, glad that you mentioned it because I want to go into that path because you not only have a newsletter, you obviously have published books, right?
Mhm.
You have published books, you have a podcast, and you're creating so much though. And for people that are entrepreneurs, sometimes when we come across with people like yourself, we seen all those things that you're achieving, right? They kind of like, oh, that's a lot. In a way,
Mhm.
it might sound a lot, which is it's true, it's a lot.
It is
However, talking to you, it's clear to me that you enjoy every aspect of it.
every aspect.
You completely immerse into it, you trust it, you're doing it from the heart. And that to me is really key to anything you want to create. Once again, it's not trying to just solve the problems. Like how can this create an impact to create a better world?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you asked me this question because, I get this a lot where people are like, oh my gosh, you put so much out there, so much content, so much this. And for a couple reasons. First, like, I felt like I was a little bit behind in the sense that I felt like I should have stepped into my purpose, even though I believe in divine timing, but I
Yeah.
also felt like, gosh, I should have stepped into this, calling a long time ago because I heard the call years ago, but
Mm,
I was living a lot more fear based, I was thinking like, oh gosh, I'm a single mom. Like, how can I take care of my kids? Like, I need to have a regular job, and I think it's so important. Like when I put myself back into that love space, it allowed me to operate a lot more free. And
mm,
because I understood my purpose, it
yeah.
allowed me to create a lot faster and a lot more. And I create from a space of giving and I want to give things away because people always tell me, "Oh my God, you're giving so much away. You should be charging for that," And I'm like, look, I believe the money will come, and when it
Yeah.
does, like it's I'm not worried about it, like I'm more worried about like how can I help someone and how can I like create this as a part of my legacy, because it really
Yeah.
is everything that we do is a part of our legacy, believe it or not.
Yeah.
As the beautiful Dr. Maya Angelou says, your
Mhm.
legacy is in one thing, but it's every life you touch. And so if you think about that,
Yeah.
all the stuff that you're putting out, your content, I create a lot of content and, for a lot of different social media platforms, but I also enjoy it, and I enjoy helping others. And so you don't know who's going to read that. It's so
Yeah.
beautiful the DMs I get and people saying like, you don't know how much I needed to hear this today. You don't
Yeah.
know how much this impacted me. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going through this problem right now. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And that's really why I do it, because I can't coach everybody, as
Exactly.
much as I would love to, but you just never know who's going to see your stuff. And also people like to take in things in different forms, right? So some people like short-term content, some people like short videos, some people like to read. I love to read. So,
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to reach as many people as I could, but also with the podcast is not just share my journey, my learnings, my lessons, but also all these beautiful people who I get to speak to
Yeah.
because I'm learning so much through them. It's like free coaching for me,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you probably feel the same way. It's like,
Absolutely.
I just get so many gems when I talk to people, but also my goal is to share with people who maybe can't afford coaching, and then now they see themselves like if I have you on, they're like, wow, I see myself in Omar, and
Hmm.
I'm exactly where he was. And now your story is a shining light, for
Yeah.
them to help
Yeah.
guide them, a bit of a blueprint for them, maybe not to, emulate perfectly, but at least to have a map, and I think
Yeah.
that's what we're all here for. We're here really to do one thing, and it's, or three things I would say. It's, to love ourselves, you know,
Hmm.
as our creator loves us and created us,
Yeah.
and also love others and to tap into
Yeah.
our purpose so then we can share it.
Yeah. It is very beautiful though. Thank you for sharing everything, and I really want to congratulate you for all the amazing things you created. And I love the
Thank you.
fact that everything is connected with purpose, though. Everything that you
Everything.
just mentioned is connected with purpose. It's you never mentioned it's like I'm here for the followers, I'm here for the likes, I'm here for
Yeah.
anything. And I think that's the approach that nowadays so many entrepreneurs take. And people, when they ask me about my podcast, I'm like, I'm having so much fun. I'm
Yes.
enjoying it. And just like yourself, I'm bringing somebody that I'm learning so much. And you just like right now, we're talking about pressure. You have a different perspective. In my mind,
Yeah.
you start raising my mind. I'm like, wow, that's a very different. I'm gonna try it. In my mind, I'm already thinking I need to do something with that. How can I reframe it? And I'm always just like you, picking up their brain. Whoever comes in here, I'm like, I have to learn. I'm just here to learn. I'm just here to learn. And that's the mindset that I apply when it comes down to bringing somebody into the podcast. I'm like, I'm just here to learn. At the same time, as an entrepreneur, how can I continue to support every entrepreneur? Hey, let's bring some tools that can help them, right? Because we want to create a bigger impact. Just like you, I can only coach so many people. Like,
Yeah.
let's bring the podcast and let's create something bigger. Let's roll it. And just like you, when you get those DMs, like, there's no comparison though. Like
No.
that feeling, there's no comparison. And it's like people just like you, people's like, Omar, you're doing so much, you're giving everything away. I'm like, yeah, aren't you afraid people is going to steal your ideas? I'm like, no. If they do it, good. I'm glad. Take it. I create
That's,
more. I'm
I mean,
very
the way
creative.
a good creator is, it's like, I mean, I have people imitate my words verbatim, like,
Hmm.
and literally pawn it as their own, but I'm like, at the end of the day, that's exactly what God wanted me to do. Like,
Yeah.
like I'm here to lead, and,
Mhm.
but I also understand I'm very much a student. So I operate with two hats, and I'm always a student and a teacher. And so
Yeah.
everything I learn, I try and find a very creative way to share it where it can
Right.
impact someone. It's like I want them to use it, because that's actually, believe it or not, it's actually a part of my legacy, because you
Yeah.
don't know how they're going to take your words and then who they're going to help and share it with within their network, and how it's going to impact them.
Yeah.
That's a part of your blessings, believe it or not. And not that we're only doing it for that, but that's really like, if you believe in karma, like
Mhm.
that's part of your good karma, that you're putting out. It's going to come back, and so that's,
Yes.
I don't really think about, like, you can't keep track. I mean, there's so many so many content creators, so many people grabbing stuff, and at the end of the day, I'm like, that's what they're supposed to do. When you do great work and you're great at what you
Yeah.
do, people are going to imitate it, period, the end.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's a beautiful thing because
Yeah.
that means it works. That means it works. And you created something very powerful, right? So, on that note, I want to touch the topic about mompreneur. You have mentioned a couple of times that you're a mom, you're taking care of your kids, you're
Yes.
a single mom. And this is specific for all the mompreneurs. How are you able to handle all the challenges that entrepreneurship brings
Mhm.
without feeling guilty about immersing as an entrepreneur, and then who's going to take care of my kids? I'm not taking care of my kids, because
Mhm.
people have moms that struggle with feeling guilty
Oh yeah,
of going
absolutely.
into create something for them or something they want to create as entrepreneur, but then it's like, who's my family? Like, who's I'm not spending enough time with my kids. How are you able to in a way balance all that particular
Great
situation?
question. Great question. First, I don't balance. That's the thing. I don't believe in balance because I'm not a boat, and so I'm not trying to balance. But what I do understand, and I think is so important as a mom, is again go back to your why. Why are you even doing things? And
Yeah.
so my why is really big, and it's strong, and it's very purposeful, and it's intentional. And so when I do take time away from my kids, I make it clear to them why I'm doing that. So then they understand, And when I actually went on this journey, I actually invited them into the process, so then that way they could also get excited about it. And my daughter was so excited about it. She got inspired by, a book she was reading and then also like what I was doing. And so she wanted to create her own company. And so I wanted to water her. So we started her business, Harlan Rose. It's an e-commerce business for girls, and it's an empowerment, business that really has empowering terms, on different T-shirts and items that young girls can really align to. And so
Nice.
I think that's a part of it is like first, like there is no balance in this.
Hmm.
One day your business is going to need you more than your kids. And then there's going to be days where your kids are going to need you more. So what I actually do is I harmonize things. And
Hmm.
so like, how can I create more, more music, more flow?
Yeah.
Good music flows whatever genre you're listening to, right? And so I look at things like that, like how can I create more flow in my life? And so I operate under like guiding principles, and I operate under a certain set of systems that allow me to
Yeah.
show up fully. And one large part of that, a component of that, is protecting my time and my energy.
Yeah.
And the last one is my peace. And those are three things that are completely non-negotiable for me. And so like, with my time, it's like I am not only expecting others, to respect my time, but I respect my time.
Hmm.
And so and when they don't, like, I call them up to the standard. A lot of times people call you out. I call people up to the standard,
Hmm.
and this is my standard. And so, but doesn't mean I don't get it right every single time, like I'm human, but
Yeah.
I think if you have that standard for yourself, it makes things a little bit easier. Around my energy, like, I always measure what's giving me energy for the day and what's depleting me,
Yeah.
and then more importantly, what am I giving energy to? And
Yeah.
how much of that is being used in the right way. And so I take a
Hmm.
look at a lot of those things, and that's what allows me to operate like when I'm with my kids. So I always do things fully. So when I'm working, I actually turn my phone off. I don't take calls,
Nice.
like personal
Yeah.
calls the day,
Yeah.
right? And I used to, and it used to deplete my energy, and so many of us are guilty of this, where you get on the phone, you think it's going to be a quick call, and all of a sudden an hour's gone by, and you're like, oh my God, I just gave an hour of my time.
Yeah.
So, and that just took away. So I actually don't take anything that's not a work call during my working hours, because I have
Mm.
6 hours that I have to knock some stuff out, right? And I
Yeah.
have multiple businesses, multiple things that I'm juggling, that is very important for me to stay very focused.
Hmm.
And then I really align my schedule, so I time block.
Yeah.
And the way that I operate is very to my schedule. But I also schedule in time for joy. And so if you actually look at my calendar, there will literally be a slot that says joy. And
Yeah.
then there will be another slot that says me time. And so I make sure that I carve in that, and make sure that I'm, allowing myself to reset before I go into the next thing. And so even before I go pick my kids up, I take time in between. So then that way I can show up fully with my children,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
then I'm focused on them. And then, once cook dinner, do all those things, and I get back and I finish whatever needs to get finished for the day. Or sometimes I just relax, but I think it's so important, again, going back to knowing yourself. You need to know your why. You need to know, like,
Yeah.
what is so important, what's important for you to do this. Like, there needs to be a
Yeah.
strong why. And then you feel a lot less guilty, like,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that guilt won't come up for certain things, but it's like, I think when your why is so important, you get everybody else excited about your why too. Like, my kids are very excited about my why. They understand my purpose. We've
Yeah.
talked about it. And so they
Yeah.
understand sometimes I need to focus on this, and that's okay. And then most times I'm focused on them.
Yeah. It's very beautiful, though. Thank you for sharing. And once again, amazing job. I think it's clear to me that you are very guided by purpose, but at the same time, you have your systems in place. You call it systems. You have your systems in place, and this is not something that you created just out of nowhere. You start developing at the early stages of your entrepreneurial
Mhm.
journey. Just like we mentioned about the time and energy, you mentioned earlier the fact that you like, I just needed to focus on the things I needed to focus. You fully immerse. Myself, when I learned how to manage my energy against my time, it completely changes. You mentioned of the fact that once I'm in this call, I'm fully immersed into this call. I know I have X, Y, and Z things that I got to do. However, at the same time, I'm just here, and I'm going to
Yes.
fully immerse. And for me, it has been one of the most powerful things. Just like you, as a personal trainer, I remember being in the gym, and at the end of the day, I will ask myself, "When I'm so tired, I'm doing what I love, like I'm loving it, but why am I so tired?" So when I start paying attention, when I was training one person and the other person came 5 minutes earlier, my mind is already thinking about the next person. And I was
Interesting.
neglecting the person that I was with. I was being disrespectful in a way. And I had to apologize. When I became aware of it, I apologized to that person. Even that person that I was training is like, "Oh, you're not going to." I'm like, "No, I'll be there with that person at a certain time. I'm here with you. And I'm fully with you." And they start
Yes.
noticing, people start saying like, "Thank you. I really appreciate all your attention." I was like, uh, "You're welcome, but you deserve it. You deserve my full attention." So that was very powerful to me, and I'm glad that you mentioned it because I'm like, "Well, finally somebody else that's managed their energy," because I think it's very powerful, though.
It
It's
is.
a key. It's just super powerful.
But we give our energy away in so many instances, right? Like whether it's,
Yeah,
and I call it your power, like I
yeah,
own my power. Like I
yeah,
don't allow anyone to take my power from me. And
yeah,
that doesn't mean that I haven't in the past. Like when I was younger, I used to get
yeah,
upset, like, maybe someone cut me off in traffic or I had a bad call or maybe a candidate didn't accept the job or, it's
yeah,
like all these things we give so much of our energy and our power
yeah,
too that we don't hold it for ourselves. And so I'm not attached to any outcome. And I think that's like when you ask me about, um the kind of, scaling, it's like
yeah,
I'm not attached to that, you know,
yeah,
like that is I think for me a superpower is I don't have attachments to things. Like I understand, like even in a relationship, like I
yeah,
think where people make the mistake is they attach themselves to the person. And if you believe in God or higher power, it's like actually God owns that person. You don't.
yeah,
Like even if you're married, it's like you're attaching yourself to the person, but that person is not yours. So I
yeah.
attach myself to the love. I attach myself to the respect. I attach myself to, those things in a relationship. So then when those things are no longer in a relationship, I'm free. I set myself free from that.
Yeah. Thank you. That's beautiful. And the other thing I want to mention too is the fact that you created an impact and you created the ripple effect, and now that your kids are following your
Yes.
path,
Amazing.
and that is so beautiful. I think it's, we all can be entrepreneurs. Some people do it in a different way. I mean, we all
Yeah.
are entrepreneurs. We just choose to do it differently. I'm glad that they have someone to look up to, and I'm
Thank
just
you.
really, it sounded very powerful, the fact that you invited them to your process. You invited them to the journey. Instead of just the question that I asked you, how are you able to navigate both? Right? You're like, no, hold on. They coming with me. We
Yes.
all navigating this. And I think to me, when I ask you, I'm like, I really need to, because people thinks they gotta need to the buy. I'm like, no, they all won. At the end of the day, you all won. How can you all navigate this process? Because it's a process. Just figure it out and try things, right? Just try things. And it's beautiful the fact that now she has her own company and you supporting her and all the things that they do. And talking about all those things that you are creating, I want to talk about a little bit all the things that you are creating. So if you can just please take the time to
Sure.
let the audience know about all the things that you're doing, because a lot of people don't have that much knowledge when it comes down to it. So I want us to educate us a little bit.
Yeah, no, of course. Well, before I do that, I would love to just add on to what you were saying because it was so beautiful. And I think the reason why I brought my children along in my process is because, similar to an organization, like I operate my home like an organization. Like I'm the CEO of my life, and so a large part of that is like being the CEO of my household. And in any organization that I've ever worked for, the best ones always bring people along in their
Yeah.
decisions. They
Hmm.
bring people along in, the next moves or the goals of the company. And when you don't, it's detrimental. And so I took the same approach in my household, that I wanted to bring my children along so they understood, because there was going to be times where maybe we had to, you know, uh, hold back from going on a vacation, right? Because maybe like business is a little bit slower, or, like whatever it is, but when you understand, your kids understand at their level. My kids are 7 and 8, but
yeah,
I tried to break it down to them at their level that they could understand, but I wanted to bring them along so they didn't feel excluded, so they
yeah,
could, get excited. So if, things were hard, they understood like why maybe I was feeling down or whatever it is,
yeah,
and so I think like in everything that I do, I operate under a set of guiding principles, and my operating system just functions like that. So,
yeah,
but to answer your question about all the things I'm doing, first and foremost, I create a lot of content. And so whether you're following me on social media, or you would love to follow me after this, I am Damesha Craig across all social platforms. And so I put out a lot of free content, really focused for leaders. And when I say leaders, you don't need a title to be a leader. We're all leading in some capacity of our lives. Even a stay-at-home mom is a leader. And
yeah,
so I feel like, people can grab some gems from some of the content I'm creating. But I also have the newsletter, which I mentioned earlier on Substack.
yeah,
It's called the Soul Fueler Journal. And I am also creating a community called Her Leadership Garden. And it's really for women. It's for women of all walks of life that are wanting to lead, but also step into their light and their purpose. And so it's a 12-step transformational course community that really helps you get more whole, because again, to our point that we were mentioning earlier, we serve from such a fractional version of ourselves. So how can we pour back into ourselves so then we can pour into others and step more into our light and purpose? And so I'm creating Her Leadership Garden, and you can just give that a Google, and it'll take you right there. But then I also have an agency, and it's a recruiting agency, because in my former hat that I wore was a people leader, so I didn't want to completely do away with that, because it allows me to coach leaders and organizations, but also help them scale and be a lot more intentional and purposeful as they're building their companies. And so
yeah.
whether it's from a recruiting standpoint or an HR standpoint, I also have an agency that services that, and I'm a board advisor on startups, and I do that for a couple different startups, and always open to board opportunities. So reach out to me.
Yeah.
and and I also have books, on Amazon. So I have an ebook, and I also wrote 2 children's books
Nice.
for my children, which is a large part of the guiding principles that I have in my coaching program, which is, I have a quote that says, life is ABC, or life is a BCD, excuse me, because we're all born, we're all going to die one day, but everything in between is our choice. And so I wrote a children's book around the power of choice, and allowing
Nice.
children to know that they hold the power to make whatever choice they come. And some choices come with consequences if they're red choices, and then there's green choices. And then my second book is all around helping children understand how to fuel their mind, their body, and their soul.
Nice. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing everything, and it's truly amazing. It's been truly amazing chatting with you and sharing this particular, conversation. It's truly um, powerful, all the things you mentioned, and I'm glad that we were able to touch so many topics when it comes down to entrepreneurship, the ins and outs. And I wanted to give you the opportunity, if there's anything that I haven't give you the opportunity to share with us, this is the moment. Take the
Oh,
microphone.
you did such a beautiful job. I love this conversation, and I love the direction. I love that it was free flowing. The one thing I did forget to mention is my podcast. So, I do have a podcast. If you're, interested in being a guest on, you can hit me up, or, you can tune in. It's every Sunday, but it's called the Soul Fueler Journal, or excuse me, Sunday Soul Day. And, again, everything is centered around soul, because I think that when you do things with your soul, it's a lot more purposeful.
Yeah.
And, so if anyone's interested, I interview a lot of guests from all walks of life. But, I would just say I would love to leave the audience with, maybe one thing, and it's, really spend time with yourself, get to know yourself, and if you can get to a place of healing and radical acceptance and loving yourself, like so many things open up from there, like
Yeah.
it's so, not everybody wants to jump into entrepreneurship, but loving yourself, healing yourself, and learning yourself takes you to so many different places, regardless of what you do. Whether you're a stay at home mom and you're pouring back into your kids, imagine if you're doing it from a healed space, and not a fear based space and more of a loving space. But you have to start with the love of yourself first.
Yeah. Beautiful though. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Damisha.
Thank
This has
you.
been very powerful, and I'm so grateful for you taking the time and energy to share with us. I learned so many things. Thank you for all the insights. Thank you for all the wisdom. But more than anything, thank you for being you. I really want to
Yeah.
congratulate you for all the great things that you've been doing. You obviously, created so much. Like I said, from one creator to another creator. I know the work that you had to do. It's clear to me that everything has now you understand more a little bit of behind the scenes of how you're able to achieve so many things and all the things that you are creating and the ripple effect that you are creating. To me, it makes total sense, and I just want to say congratulations for all the things that you're doing. Is really admirable, and for all the moms, she's a great example of the things that you can create, you can achieve once you get to know yourself, you fully immerse in your own process, so you can give the best version of yourself. It's really true when people say you start living in a different way when you understand that you're gonna die. That's what
Yes.
I take from you. Me, I learned it. My father passed away on my birthday, so
Mm.
when I sat down, for me it was like, wait a second, today is my birthday. My father just passed away. I'm
Mm.
gonna die. You live and you die. What you do in between is really up to
Yes,
you. And I say, I have
absolutely.
42 years of experience. I'm going to do anything and everything I can on my power with this 42 years of experience to create great things. And I'm going to continue to know myself. So ever since I'm here and I'm just loving this life and I don't take life for granted. And it's clear to me that you are really grateful about it. And it's very beautiful though. It's been amazing this, but thank you so much, Damisha, for
Uh,
being in the show.
you. Thank you so much. This was awesome. Awesome. And I'm so excited for your podcast. You're doing a phenomenal job. And I love the new direction because I know you had one earlier on. So the conversations have been awesome. So keep it up. Keep going. That's what it's all about. Like we can pause, but don't stop. Keep
Exactly.
going.
You are correct. Well, thank you so much for being in this show and stay tuned for the next episode.